Let's face it, the Toyota HiLux and Ford Ranger are the pin-ups of the ute world at the moment. They're dominating the sales charts and they're wooing over new audiences, particularly in these SR5 and Wildrak grades. It's no huge surprise that other car makers want in on the action, and Isuzu is the latest to update its offering. This is the 2020 Isuzu D-MAX. It's safer, more refined, but can it beat the updated HiLux and our car sales carryover champion, the Ranger, at their own game? Let's find out. 2020 is shaping as a massive year for ute makers in general, with most of the field updating or facelifting their offerings in Australia. The Toyota HiLux and Ford Ranger will be squarely in the sights of most, having won over droves of buyers, particularly with these high specification $60,000 dual cab offerings. The D-MAX has taken a slightly different path in recent years, winning over buyers with strong ownership prospects and a no-frills approach. But this latest third generation model marks a huge departure, particularly in this X-Terrain trim. It's got a new engine, a new chassis, sharper styling and a big interior makeover. Importantly, in this comparison, it also climbs to the top of the class for safety. The Isuzu debuts a new segment-first centre airbag, as well as autonomous emergency braking, forward collision warning, lane departure warning, and much more. Underneath, there's a new engine, electric power steering, 30mm longer wheelbase, and a new suspension platform that is said to deliver a more controlled, responsive ride. Prices have climbed as a result, with the X-Terrain flagship sitting between the Ranger and HiLux on paper. There is certainly a new theme at play here. The D-MAX feels more composed on the road with nicer steering and a slightly more refined ride. Importantly, out of these three utes, it's still the sharpest over bumps, with pitter-patter style imperfections tremoring through the cabin and larger hits making more of a pronounced impression through the cabin. The diesel engine as well, even with its higher outputs, is the coarsest on test and doesn't really set any new segment benchmarks in terms of performance. The D-MAX engine outputs less than the HiLux and Ranger on paper, but still offers the same 3.5 tonne towing and 1 tonne payload capacities. The Isuzu wins points for its soft contact areas, oddment storage and new 9-inch centre screen, even if it's a bit finicky to use. The new model features a host of USB ports across the cabin, but is the only one of these three to miss out on a household charging point. In addition, the new safety systems are great in theory, but in practice, they require some finesse. On test, the D-MAX safety suite made more noise than a wind chime factory. The HiLux's success in Australia needs little introduction. It's been the best-selling new car in the country in recent years. Even so, Toyota has made the biggest set of changes to the 8th generation HiLux since its introduction in 2015. It too aims for a more rounded dynamic skill set with more power from the engine and a much-needed interior overhaul. The updated HiLux scores a new touchscreen with more hardwired buttons, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, plus a digital speedo, matching the D-MAX and Ranger. Underneath the skin, there's been a big focus on ride comfort and refinement, thanks to longer leaf springs and a host of other changes. The diesel engine also gets a bump in outputs, courtesy of a new turbocharger and other changes. The HiLux has made a clear step forward with those changes, but in this company, it's still afflicted by some wobble and flex over bumps. So you not only have the vertical movement to contend with, but also some lateral movement as the body shimmies over imperfections underneath you. Elsewhere, improvements to the driveline have eked a little bit more performance from the HiLux on road, but in this comparison, it still feels the slower of the three cars. The HiLux has always been a known quantity underload. Happily, the latest changes mean it's more rounded when unladen too. The HiLux scores strongly across the board, addressing previous criticisms with the new update. All told, the cabin still has a quality, hard-wearing premise to its fit-out, but misses out on basic items like a driver vanity mirror and more than one USB port. The HiLux also has shorter 6-month, 10,000 kilometre servicing intervals in this comparison, elevating servicing costs to more than double the Ford's over a 5-year projection. That brings us to the Ranger. It's the oldest vehicle on test, and it's also the most expensive in this Wildrak trim. Even so, the 2-litre engine introduced midway through the PX2's life cycle has the biggest outputs of these three, and it's also the quickest off the mark. I've got to be honest, the Ranger is still the benchmark on the road as well. The ride is more composed and it has the quietest cabin of these three. Yes, it still rides inherently like a dual cab ute, but it's much more car-like with nicely weighted and accurate steering and a more settled demeanour in a mix of conditions. It's incredible that the Ranger is still the pick of the bunch dynamically. Though the internals aren't perfect, the Ranger Wildrak feels well put together with soft contact points and quality materials. It's the only one of these three to miss out on rear air vents, but it wins points back for separate top tether points in the rear, whereas the HiLux and D-MAX both have fabric looping points. We towed a 3-tonne caravan with each ute, where the Ford and Toyota felt the more composed offerings, while initially the Isuzu appeared to have lost some of its stability on account of the latest chassis changes. It may turn out otherwise, so we'll reserve full judgment until a dedicated tow test. In a separate off-road section, all three utes scored well, climbing different obstacles with relative ease, courtesy of low range and high range 4-wheel drive, a rear diff lock, hill descent control, and a water wading depth of between 700 and 800 millimetres. In fairness, all three competitors have strengths and weaknesses and could be easily justified as your winner. In addition, all three offer strong warranties, excellent standard equipment levels, and car-like safety. The competition has never been this close. New technologies come and go, but ultimately it's what's underneath the fancy skin of a dual cab ute that sets it apart. And incredibly, after 9 years in business, it's still the Ford Ranger that takes the win. It's the most comfortable, the most refined, and the most capable across our series of tests, retaining its place as the pick of the dual cab crop.